where disturbance quietly enters. Consider this carefully before anything else. Most suffering does not arrive as a crisis. It begins as something smaller and easier to miss. A thought passes through the mind, unannounced and unexamined. It feels reasonable. It feels accurate. And because it feels that way, you agree with it without noticing that you have done so. This is the central Stoic claim. Events themselves are neutral. They carry no distress, no insult, no threat. What unsettles you is not what happens, but what you decide it means. The moment a thought is accepted as a verdict, disturbance follows as a consequence, not as a surprise. This is not said to comfort you. It is said to return responsibility to where it belongs. If suffering came from events, you would be helpless. If it came from other people, you would be dependent on their behavior. But it does not. It comes from judgment. And judgment is yours. The difficulty is that judgment rarely announces itself. It hides inside ordinary reactions. A delay becomes disrespect. A comment becomes an attack. A setback becomes a sign of failure. None of these conclusions are forced upon you. They are chosen, often without pause. Stoic discipline begins by making this visible. Not to suppress thought, but to see it clearly. To recognize the exact point where a passing impression turns into an accepted belief. That point is small. It is quiet. And it is where freedom either holds or is surrendered. Notice this carefully, the line between authority and confusion. Everything that follows depends on one clear distinction. There is a boundary that determines whether your effort produces stability or frustration. It is the boundary between what acts upon you and what you decide about it. When this boundary is unclear, discipline becomes exhausting. When it is clear, discipline becomes precise. What belongs to you is narrow, but it is complete. Your judgments, your intentions, your choices, your use of reason. These are the only things that respond directly to your command. Nothing external shares this quality. Not people. Not circumstances. Not outcomes. Not reputation. They may influence you, but they do not belong to you. This sounds simple. It is rarely applied. Most people live as if the boundary were wider than it is. They speak and act as though other people's behavior were theirs to manage. As though outcomes were owed. As though effort guaranteed results. When reality fails to cooperate, frustration appears. Not because something has gone wrong, but because authority has been misplaced. Consider an ordinary example. You send a message and receive no reply. The event itself is neutral. Silence has no meaning. Yet a thought arises, I am being ignored. If you accept this, irritation follows. But notice what happened. You treated another person's action as if it were under your control, and then judged the lack of control as a failure. The disturbance did not come from silence. It came from assuming authority where there was none. Or consider work. You prepare carefully, act responsibly, and the result is still unfavorable. The effort was yours. The outcome was not. If you confuse the two, disappointment feels personal. If you separate them, the situation remains clear. You did what belonged to you. Nothing more was promised. Stoic discipline does not ask you to withdraw from life. It asks you to place responsibility accurately. You are accountable for the quality of your judgment, not for how the world responds to it. When this is forgotten, even success produces anxiety, because it feels temporary and fragile. When it is remembered, even difficulty remains workable. This distinction also explains why advice so often fails. People are told to control their emotions, change their circumstances, or make others understand. None of this is fully within their authority. Emotion arises. Circumstances shift. Others act according to their own judgments. Trying to command these produces tension rather than discipline. What you can command is how impressions are received. Whether a thought is examined or accepted. whether a reaction is automatic or deliberate. This is not passive. It is exacting. It requires attention rather than force. The cost of ignoring this boundary is subtle but constant. Energy is spent resisting what cannot be directed. Blame replaces clarity. Responsibility is diluted across events, people, and conditions. Over time, this creates a sense of being acted upon, rather than acting. The Stoic position is uncompromising here. If it is not yours, do not carry it as if it were. If it is yours, do not abandon it by distraction or habit. Discipline begins by refusing to confuse these domains. This does not remove difficulty from life. It removes unnecessary struggle. When authority is placed correctly, effort stops leaking into resentment. Action becomes cleaner. Judgment becomes steadier. This explains where effort is misplaced, but not yet how disturbance takes hold, the silent moment where consent occurs. Now we look at what actually creates disturbance. Between an event and your reaction, something small but decisive takes place. A thought appears. It arrives without invitation. This is not yet a problem. Stoic philosophy is precise here. Impressions are automatic. They arise from the senses, memory, and habit. You do not choose their arrival. The problem begins only when you agree with them. This agreement is called assent. It is the moment the mind says, yes, this is how things are. Once assent is given, the thought stops being a suggestion and becomes a verdict. Emotion, tension, and action follow from that verdict as consequences. It is important to be exact. Feeling is not assent. An impression may carry a bodily reaction, tightening in the chest, heat in the face, a surge of irritation. None of this is yet a failure of discipline. These reactions belong to nature. What belongs to you is whether you endorse the story attached to them. Consider criticism. Someone makes a remark about your work. Immediately, a thought arises, I am being disrespected. That thought feels convincing. It often feels true. But notice the sequence. The sound of words reached your ears. That is the event. The interpretation followed. That is the judgment. When you accept it without pause, irritation feels inevitable. But it was not imposed. It was authorized. Or consider delay. A plan does not move as expected. The impression appears, this should not be happening. If you assent to this, impatience follows. The body tightens. The mind searches for blame. Yet nothing in the delay itself required that conclusion. The disturbance came from agreeing that reality violated an expectation. This is why Stoic discipline does not begin with changing behavior. It begins with identifying assent. Most people skip this step entirely. They experience reaction and assume it was forced. In truth, it was permitted. The moment of assent is brief. It is often missed because it feels like part of the impression itself. The thought and the agreement seem to arrive together. Training consists in separating them. Not intellectually, but practically. You do this by slowing down the internal sequence. When an impression arises, instead of following it forward, you pause and look at it. You ask, without drama, is this necessarily true? Or is this within my authority? These questions do not suppress the impression. They suspend assent. This suspension is where freedom operates. Discipline as repetition of attention. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. Discipline is often imagined as force. Holding steady through discomfort. Suppressing reaction. Enduring pressure until it passes. This image is common, and it fails quickly. Force requires constant energy. When attention drops, reaction returns. Nothing has been trained. Stoic discipline is something different. It is not resistance. It is rehearsal. Training means repeating a specific action until it becomes reliable under pressure. In this case, the action is not external behavior. It is the act of noticing an impression and withholding assent. That is the movement being trained. Everything else is secondary. This is why insight alone changes very little. You can understand the theory perfectly and still react the same way tomorrow. Understanding does not interrupt habit. Repetition does. Consider how reactions normally form. A familiar situation appears. A familiar thought follows. Agreement is automatic. Emotion and behavior cascade from there. This sequence has been practiced for years. It is efficient, not deliberate. Discipline replaces this with a different sequence. The situation appears. The impression arises. Attention notices it. Assent is paused. A choice is made. This sequence is slower at first. It feels awkward. That is expected. New movements always do. Force tries to overpower the old habit after it has already taken control. Training intervenes before control is surrendered. The difference is subtle but decisive. This also explains why Stoic discipline does not aim to remove emotion. Emotion is part of the impression. It arrives before assent. Trying to eliminate it is both unrealistic and unnecessary. What matters is whether emotion dictates judgment. You may feel irritation. That does not require you to conclude that something wrong has occurred. You may feel anxiety. That does not require you to conclude that something must be avoided. Discipline does not deny these sensations. It prevents them from becoming commands. Training works through repetition under mild conditions. Not during crisis. Not during extremes. You do not wait for major events to practice. You practice when the stakes are low, so that the response is available when they are not. This is why Stoic texts emphasize daily attention rather than heroic effort. The mind learns through use. Each time you notice a thought and delay agreement, you reinforce the habit of choice. Each time you fail and later recognize it, the lesson still registers. Training is not erased by imperfection. It may help to think of assent as a gate rather than a force. Impressions press against it constantly. Most are allowed through by habit. Discipline is the practice of guarding that gate consciously. Not closing it permanently. Not forcing it shut. Simply choosing when it opens. This is why Stoic texts emphasize attention more than willpower. Willpower resists after assent has already occurred. Attention intervenes before it. Once you have agreed that something is bad, unfair, or threatening, the effort required to remain calm multiplies. Before agreement, almost no effort is needed. The mind resists this idea because it feels impersonal. People prefer to believe they are reacting to reality rather than participating in interpretation. But the Stoic position is firm. Disturbance is not delivered fully formed. It is assembled internally, step by step. This does not mean you will always succeed. Training does not eliminate impressions. It refines your response to them. Some thoughts will still slip through. That is expected. Discipline is measured by noticing sooner, not by perfection. When you begin to see assent clearly, responsibility becomes unavoidable. There is no one else to credit or blame. The power is quiet, but it is constant. Every reaction passes through it. Understanding the mechanism is not enough. It must be trained. Force produces tension because it treats the mind as an enemy. Training treats it as something to be guided. Over time, this guidance becomes internalized. The pause appears sooner. The reaction weakens. Not because you fought it, but because you no longer authorize it automatically. This approach requires patience. Results are quiet. There is no dramatic shift. The change shows itself in smaller reactions, shorter disturbances, quicker recoveries. These are signs of skill, not suppression. Discipline, in the Stoic sense, is not about enduring more. It is about consenting less. The effort is not to hold steady against emotion, but to recognize when judgment is forming and decide whether it deserves approval. Training remains abstract unless it appears in daily life. How ordinary moments become practice. This practice is proven in ordinary moments. Discipline does not announce itself through dramatic tests. It shows itself in situations so small they are usually dismissed. A minor delay. A misplaced item. A comment that lands awkwardly. These are not interruptions to practice. They are the practice. The first discipline is anticipating impressions without anxiety. This means recognizing, in advance, that inconvenience is part of daily life. People will misunderstand. Plans will shift. Systems will fail. When this is acknowledged calmly, impressions lose their shock. You are not preparing for disaster. You are aligning expectation with reality. This anticipation is not pessimism. It does not rehearse negative stories. It simply removes the assumption that things must go smoothly. When the mind stops demanding ease, it stops being surprised by friction. The impression still arrives, but it arrives into a prepared space. The second discipline is the pause before assent. This pause does not need to be long. One breath is enough. The purpose is not to analyze endlessly, but to interrupt automatic agreement. When a thought appears, "This is unacceptable. I am being treated unfairly. This should not be happening," you do not argue with it. You wait. That waiting changes the sequence. Instead of reaction following impression immediately, there is space. In that space, you remember the boundary of authority. You remember that a thought is not a command. You may still choose to act. But the action now comes from decision rather than reflex. This pause feels insignificant. It is not. It is the exact point where training operates. Without it, discipline collapses into habit. With it, even brief attention restores choice. The third discipline is the evening review. This is not confession. It is not self-judgment. It is observation. You recall moments from the day where impressions appeared and where assent was given quickly or withheld successfully. The tone matters. There is no praise and no guilt. Guilt is itself an unexamined judgment. It assumes that failure deserves punishment. Stoic practice rejects this. Mistakes are information. They show where training is incomplete. That is all. During review, you do not relive the emotion. You note the sequence. Here, I agreed too quickly. Here, I noticed and paused. This strengthens awareness for the next day. The mind learns through repetition and recognition, not through self-criticism. These practices are simple. Their simplicity causes them to be underestimated. People look for techniques that feel powerful. Stoic discipline relies on what is repeatable. Anticipate calmly. Pause briefly. Review honestly. None of this requires ideal conditions. You do not need quiet. You do not need time. You need attention applied consistently. This is why discipline belongs to ordinary life. It cannot be postponed until circumstances improve. Over time, something subtle changes. Impressions still arise, but they do not carry the same authority. Thoughts are seen earlier. Reactions shorten. Recovery becomes quicker. There is less urgency to defend, explain, or control. This is not because life has become easier. It is because judgment has become more accurate. You are no longer surprised by what does not belong to you. You are no longer absent when what does belong to you requires care. Practice does not remove difficulty. It removes confusion about where difficulty must be met. From practice, sovereignty emerges, the freedom that cannot be removed. Freedom is often misunderstood. Many imagine freedom as the absence of difficulty, as ease of movement, as circumstances aligning with preference. By this definition, freedom is fragile. It depends on conditions remaining favorable. The Stoic position rejects this entirely. Freedom, properly understood, is authority over judgment. Life does not become lighter when you practice discipline. In some ways, it becomes heavier. Responsibility can no longer be shifted outward. There is no one to blame for reaction. No situation to accuse of forcing your response. This is not comforting. It is clarifying. What changes is not the weight of events, but where that weight is carried. When judgment is accurate, authority returns inward. You no longer live as if your stability were negotiated moment by moment with circumstance. You no longer wait for people to behave correctly, for plans to succeed, or for conditions to improve before you can remain steady. This does not mean you become passive. Action still matters. Effort still matters. You still plan, decide, and respond. The difference is that action is no longer confused with control. You do what belongs to you and release what does not without resentment. This is the freedom that remains when nothing external cooperates. Consider what cannot be taken from you. Your capacity to examine a thought. Your ability to pause before agreeing. Your choice to respond deliberately rather than reflexively. No delay, no insult, no loss removes these. They are available in every condition. They require no permission. Comfort, by contrast, is easily taken. It depends on predictability. It depends on others. It depends on outcomes. The more you identify freedom with comfort, the more anxious you become about protecting it. Discipline dissolves this confusion. Stoic freedom is not an achievement. It is maintenance. It does not arrive and remain on its own. It must be exercised continually. Each impression presents the same question: will authority remain where it belongs, or will it be surrendered without notice? This is why the work never ends. Not because something is missing, but because judgment is always active. As long as impressions arise, assent remains relevant. Freedom is preserved moment by moment through attention, not stored as a permanent state. This can feel disappointing at first. People want a finish line. Stoicism offers something different: reliability. You may still feel irritation. You may still feel disappointment. But you recover faster. You recognize sooner. You are less carried away. Nothing about this requires life to become easier. In fact, it often allows you to face difficulty more directly. When you are no longer defending your comfort or your image, you can act with greater clarity. You can say no without hostility. You can accept loss without collapse. You can continue without bitterness. This is inner sovereignty. It is quiet. It does not announce itself. Others may not notice it at all. That is not a defect. It does not exist to be displayed. The mistake is to look for freedom in relief. Relief passes. Authority remains. When judgment stays under your command, nothing essential is at risk. You may lose opportunities. You may lose approval. You may lose ease. But you do not lose yourself in reaction. That is the difference. Nothing outside you must change for this to begin. No improvement in circumstances is required. Only accuracy about what is yours and steady practice in keeping it. Nothing more needs to be added. The responsibility that cannot be passed on. Nothing here requires escalation. What has been described is not a technique to master the world. It is a refusal to misplace responsibility. Events will continue to occur without consultation. People will continue to act from their own judgments. Circumstances will remain uncertain. None of this is corrected by philosophy. What is corrected is confusion. Most suffering persists because responsibility is quietly outsourced. Reaction is blamed on pressure. Disturbance is blamed on circumstance. Habit is mistaken for necessity. Stoic discipline removes these errors one by one, not by force, but by clarity. You are not responsible for preventing impressions. You are responsible for how you meet them. You are not required to feel nothing. You are required to notice when feeling turns into judgment. This is the work. It does not belong to anyone else. There will be days when attention fails. There will be moments when assent is given too quickly. This is not a contradiction of the practice. It is part of it. Perfection is not expected. Awareness is. Nothing about this path makes life predictable or gentle. What it makes possible is steadiness without dependence. You no longer need conditions to cooperate in order to remain clear. You no longer need relief in order to act with reason. The principle is simple. What is yours must be guarded. What is not yours must be released. Every disturbance tests this distinction. Every moment offers the same choice. The work is simple. It is not easy. And it is yours. Return to what is yours.